Now, with the rise of consumer electronics with smartphones and computers, it has limited the amount of expectation some of us might have on our mechanical watches to be running at perfect time. But even with that being the case, I think many of us would prefer to have a watch that runs with great accuracy. And in this video, we're going to be looking at are some of the more accurate watches out there, both mechanical as well as quartz, that you can buy at more of an attainable perspective. Now, attainable is going to be relative depending on the type of watch we're talking about here, so just keep all of that in mind. We'll look at some more entry-level options and then expand out where we can try to find just points of value and differentiation when looking at this idea of accuracy. Now, for this video, I'm looking at both quartz and mechanical timepieces. If I am looking at quartz, I'll probably prioritize looking at things that are a bit more exceptional, high frequency, or just have ridiculous levels of accuracy and are positioned in a good price range that makes them compelling. From the mechanical side, I'm gonna be looking at usually chronometers, master chronometers, things of that sort, and talking more about that. And I will be just jumping around here, different styles and different prices, but tried to have pretty much everything represented here for the most part when looking at those outliers of value and accuracy. So before we jump into this video specifically, I would recommend if you want more information on the idea of chronometers, looking at different accuracy standards and tests, I would recommend checking out our article looking at what is a chronometer, looking at the different testing standards, some good points of value in the industry. Not gonna go into as much detail in terms of explaining chronometers, the different tests that goes into that, but that is a good jumping off point in that article if you do want more information, as well as other brands and their own internal testing standards. We try to cover quite a few different topics in regards to that subject. Link to that will be in the description down below. So now to begin with our first watch here, and it's actually a quartz watch from Seiko, and that is with the Seiko Dolce, the SACM171. So this is a JDM model. It's probably better for smaller wrists or even women. However, when talking about why this watch is compelling, it comes down to the accuracy of the movement inside. So this actually technically has an old Grand Seiko movement inside this, around $400 or $500. I haven't checked the JDM prices. They do change here depending on where you are looking to buy these. But around $500, you can get an accuracy of a movement at plus or minus 10 seconds a year. Now, the typical quartz watch is gonna be around, say, plus or minus 30 seconds a month. Maybe sometimes will be a little bit more accurate than that, but still, that is the typical standard, which is ridiculously accurate. You're talking about a second off from perfect time of day. This is looking at every single month having that same level of accuracy that a normal quartz watch would have over a day. So absolutely incredible stuff here, crazy accurate movement. The watch is going to be smaller on the wrist, but if you're just all about accuracy, want an elegant take on getting this in a pretty, affordable package for the most part, at least relatively affordable, this is one to absolutely take a closer look at. Now, next up, we have the Bull of a Lunar Pilot. So this is a watch that is beloved by many and is, I would think, a fixture when talking about some of the more compelling watches under $1,000. And this one is more in that $500, $600 range, depending on the strap option that you go for. Now, understanding the history of this watch, I think is important in context because, of course, it does look very inspired by the Speedmaster, but it does have its own history that is compelling. So this watch was actually worn, or at least the original prototype watch was worn by astronaut David Scott in the Apollo program, actually Apollo 15, wore it on the moon as well. So this watch, in terms of its lineage, does come from a watch with that history and connection. And this is the modern creation of that standard. It is going to be a larger watch, 45 millimeters, but one of the overlooked aspects of this watch is going to be the movement. Not only does it have that sweeping type of look with the second hand, but it's also incredibly accurate. How it's able to do this is it has a high frequency quartz movement that's going to be 8 times the typical oscillation of a quartz crystal, which you're talking about 32,000 times per second. So we're talking about blistering pace here when talking about the shaking of that quartz, or vibration of that quartz, I should say. And as a result of that high frequency quartz movement on the inside, you're gonna be looking at accuracy standards of plus or minus 5 seconds per month. For our next watch here, we have the Mito MultiFort chronometer, one of my great party info facts that I always like to whip out. And I go to a lot of places where watches are the subject matter, so it might not work for you with the same amount of success rate, but Mito is a brand that is overlooked quite a bit when you're talking about chronometers. Now, they don't release the public data of certified chronometers that are actually being sent in and certified, but when they were years ago in the 2010s, at the time of doing that, Mito was actually in the top 5 in the most certified chronometers of any brand, and that's including brands like Rolex and Breitling in front of them. So Very select company, and I don't think many people consider that Mito was very much about this idea of precision and producing a pretty well-packaged watch for the money. And if you've ever handled one of their watches, pretty much no surprise there that they're trying to go the extra mile. Now, this MultiFort collection has lineage back to the 1940s. It's a name that has been used frequently over the years. This has now defined more of their everyday style, tool-oriented watch, offering a extended power reserve, COSC movement on the inside, so -4 to +6 seconds a day is the COSC standard for accuracy. This is testing the movement before it's cased up, but they do a wide variety of different watches that have a COSC movement. This is just one of them, and the MultiFort has long been this utilitarian style watch for the brand as you started to get into the middle of the 20th century, and especially in the modern collection. It's going to be defined by these more imposing characteristics with kind of interesting dials and having a nice middle ground of the sporty aesthetic, as well as having some maybe dressy upside for certain select models within the collection. Now for our next watch here, we have the Ball Engineer 3 Marvelite. So if you're not familiar with Ball's backstory, it actually was founded in Cleveland, Ohio, or slightly outside the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio. There's a horrible train crash at the end of the 19th century, and that train crash had Webb C. Ball, a local jeweler, look to work with the railroad industry in developing better standards for timekeepers on the board of trains to avoid crashes like this from ever happening again. These watches have now been adapted to some modern specification in terms of their looks. It does remind me of some just kind of entry-level Oyster Perpetual type of models in terms of what they're going for here, but nice looks. You also have the tie-in with tritium, COSC movement on the inside, and some history to go along with accuracy that I think coincide with them being worthy of being on a list like this. So when looking at independents as well as micro brands, typically you're doing everything you can to try to keep your minimum orders down. Adding extra cost is not going to be something you want to take on, unless it does help, of course, the customer. But most brands are just looking at trying to keep their business alive rather than going the extra mile at times. But one that is not guilty of that is going to be Formax. Now, Formax really came on the scene, actually was founded in 1999, but really was resurged with the release of their Essence model, and then was updated again in the last couple of years with a new logo and a refresh, and coming in with a 39mm case. So these watches are, from a case breakdown standpoint, absolutely incredible for the money in terms of how they feel in the hand. But another reason why I think these have been able to make a compelling claim for their price range is also because of the movements that they utilize. Now, they are using just off-the-shelf Sellita calibers, top grade, to go with that, so ones that are going to be certified by COSC, making them one of the more entry-level Swiss chronometers that you're going to find on the market. And that's coming from a micro brand that doesn't have a large overarching support from a larger group structure. For our next watch here, we have another brand that certainly is not going to shy away from producing a lot of watches, and also ones with a chronometer certification. We have Tissot with the Ballade. So this watch, I have to admit, I don't like the newer variation as much as the older one with the hobnail bezel. It's gonna certainly lean way more into the Datejust arena. However, that probably is going to lead into selling way more units. So I don't fault Tissot in going that direction, as the dial does, of course, look very different. But the compelling thing here is going to be, you have an 80-hour power reserve, COSC certified movements, going to be one of the more entry-level position watches from Tissot that's going to give you this optionality. There are some other options that have been phased out that you still could probably find somewhere at certain retailers, but this is one from their current collection that is really a fixture, under $1,000, getting a COSC movement, also a higher standard grade of that Powermatic movement on the inside, so all steel components. This is one of their more premium offerings from their collection, and also an introduction to their COSC watches in the range. For our next watch here, we have a couple of dive watches. This first one is going to come from Zodiac, and this is a newer release for 2022 with the new Pro Diver Seawolf. So these watches are going to be moving away from the STP movements that they typically house, being part of the Fossil group, and then shifts into the utilization of Sellita powered movements. This is their professional dive watch. And if you know the history of the Seawolf, 1953 was announced and released, same year as the 50 Fathoms and the Rolex Submariner. So this watch has roots to the boom of dive watches in the mid 20th century. Now this comes with both a titanium limited edition option that's pretty much been sold through, but also a standard stainless steel option to go along with it. ISO compliant COSC caliber on the inside with that Sellita movement, improved lume compared to the standard models from the 53 compressor, the skin cases that you're going to find, and a Zodiac's point of realignment to more of that professional dive watch pedigree that they've had established for years and years in the past. For our next dive watch, we have the Docsa Sub 300. Now, the interesting thing about the Docsa Sub300 is they don't market the idea that this is a COSC chronometer on the inside for these watches. Typically, what most brands will do is just plaster it everywhere, mention it all over the place, and make sure that you are aware how accurate this movement really is. But Docsa doesn't need to do that. Let it be discovered rather than announced, and I kind of respect that. So this watch is clearly an icon among actual divers, cushion-shaped case that wears smaller thanks to the shorter lug-to-lug. Wide variety of dial colors available, with the orange professional dial being the one that they're most well known for. ETA 2824 COSC certified movement on the inside, in a price range just above $2,000, with a pretty solid beads of rice bracelet to be packed along with it. So I think Grand Seiko needs to be on a list like this. It's just a matter of how do you want to take the angle? Do you want to talk about the spring drive, or do you want to talk about their high accuracy quartz movements? For me, I want to talk about the value position of some of those entry-level watches from the brand that have these high accuracy quartz calibers powered within them. One example is going to be the SBGN 005 in that collection of different Explorer 2 style watches, sports-oriented watches, GMT watches. You're talking about just over $3,000. You get the Grand Seiko brand, also getting a very well-finished case and dial, but then inside you're getting an incredibly accurate plus or minus 10-second a year movement that is going to pretty much wipe the floor with pretty much anything else in its price category for the most part. Now, as much as I overuse the word tool watch, I think this one is probably more appropriate than many. You're talking about accuracy that can allow you to set all of your other watches to this watch. This thing is going to be running almost the same amount of accuracy as your phone, and that's, I think, pretty impressive and allows this Grand Seiko, I think, really to shine. And quite frankly, it looks the part too. Really good looking watch. And one other Grand Seiko to throw in there if you want something of a different style is the SBG V245. A little bit dressier in its approach, a little more refined. The thing about this one though, same movement on the inside, so you have that 9F series of movements, plus or minus 10 seconds a year in accuracy, but also getting the sporty upside. Lume is nice to see here. Also 200 meters of water resistance for a watch of this positioning and styling. Incredibly nice to see. So this is a versatile one, also coming in at just slightly lower in terms of the price range. So for this next watch here, it's not only the accuracy that I want to talk about, but also just where this watch is being positioned in regards to the movement itself. And that is with the Baume & Merciers with the Clifton Bombatic. So why this movement is special: COSC certified movement on the inside, -4 to +6 seconds a day. When testing these out, they run well within those parameters as well. Talking about right around $3,000. So in general, pretty good positioning for a COSC certified movement, not the best. But really what makes this one more special is the power reserve. You're talking about 120-hour power reserve with a COSC certified movement on the inside. Pretty class leading regardless of brand. Now you could look at Oris with some of their caliber 400s, but quite frankly, the accuracy standards there are not as tight as other brands that I've noticed. They still do have some decent accuracy, but as they're kind of getting more developed with their movement technology, I find that those still are not quite as much on par as something you're going to find with a COSC certification like this within the Baume & Mercier. And then to top on that 120-hour, 5-day power reserve, that combination is a pretty deadly combo for those that are all about accuracy and not having to set their watch over and over again. So now another brand that of course is very busy when it comes to producing watches with COSC movements on the inside is going to be Longine. I would say the modern position watch that I always come to think about now and I really like to get behind is the Spirit. I think this is a great do-it-all style watch, every day in its nature. You can wear this with white t-shirt and some jeans on the bracelet and it would look great. You're talking about 100 meters of water resistance, well finished, and then a COSC certified movement on the inside with a 70-hour power reserve. It's just one of those that maybe isn't going to be as impressive in terms of accuracy as some of the other ones, and also where it's positioned in terms of getting a COSC certified movement on the inside. Not gonna be the most attainable option in doing that, but it does other things to allow the package to separate if you are somebody that wants to just check off the box of getting a COSC certified movement while still getting some other additional things and attributes that are gonna come along with it. As I mentioned, this idea of attainable chronometers and attainable accurate watches is all relative. But the next watch we have here is the Tudor Ranger. And why I think it's important to mention the Tudor Ranger is, again, it is relative, but knowing Tudor as a brand is a brand that of course produces many of their own movements now through their manufacturing arm in Kinesi for their movements, typically are going to deliver great value. But the good thing about this one, or the compelling thing about this one, is going to be that the Tudor Ranger is now priced, its starting price is below $3,000. So essentially the same starting price as the standard Black Bay 36 and watches of that collection. and getting that with a MT movement on the inside that is also Chronometer certified, making this probably the most compelling package from Tudor when you're talking about value for dollar for the movement on the inside. These movements typically are going to be found for around $1,000 more, say at least $500 more starting price. Many of the black bays starting around the mid threes when looking at the 58s and the standard black bays, and other watches falling within that collection. In addition to that, you're getting your extended 70-hour power reserve, and very similar to that Longine Spirit, a watch that can kind of do it all and be there for you in pretty much every single scenario. Some people might push back and say it's a little bit too plain for them, but if you just want a versatile piece, no nonsense, Tudor Ranger is one of the best in its class. And now for our last watch here, we have the Omega Aquaterra, or pretty much any of these entry-level Omega watches, Aquaterra, Seamaster Diver 300. These, I think, need to be included on this list just because of the Master Chronometer certification. Now, there have been other testing standards that have been unveiled from other brands, internal testing standards that, of course, are impressive as well. But why the Master Chronometer, I think, is important to touch on is just given the level of testing that these watches are going through on a lot of different fronts. Now, the number one differentiation is going to be these watches are tested up, fully cased up. All the COSC certifications are going to be done just with the movement. So this is all being done after the fact of these things being cased up. In addition to that, the range of deviation in terms of accuracy is 0 to +5 seconds a day. This is all being tested by the Federal Institute of Metrology and are going to go through 8 strenuous tests to ensure that the accuracy standards is also maintained, including under crazy magnetic fields. So the 15,000 Gauss that is commonly quoted for many of these master chronometers being something that also will come to mind as well. So not only accuracy, just generally when talking about day-to-day wear, crown up, crown down, these type of ideas. Here you're taking it a step further and really trying to put this movement through the most taxing conditions possible, and just the watch itself through the most taxing conditions possible to make sure that the accuracy is maintained regardless of the situation. But all right, guys, that is my list looking at some relatively attainable watches with remarkable accuracy in one way or another, or just have a certified chronometer on the inside for the movement. Of course, all of this is relative. I try to give reason why, hey, saying that an attainable watch is $5,000, why is that maybe compelling at that price range? Where does it stack up? When I talk about the Aquaterra and watches like that, I think it's doing things from its movement that still allow it to be an interesting, compelling package compared to the competition in that price range with those levels of intense testing that is connected to that movement. So that was the whole thought process here. What is a watch that was left off this list that you would also consider? I wasn't able to cover everything. This is just kind of a quick list I wanted to go through. I wasn't sure how people were going to even respond to a video like this, if accuracy is something people care about. I'm not a big stickler for accuracy. If a watch is running just with decent time, I'm fine. I don't wear a mechanical watch to really be telling the time perfectly. As long as I'm relatively close, I'm okay. But I know many people are all about accuracy. They want an accurate watch to the highest grade and quality that they possibly can. So where is your stance? Any other watches that you would also recommend? If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that. Definitely check out that article down below looking at everything you need to know about a chronometer, understanding the different testing standards, and what goes into that process. Also, definitely check out teddybaldassarre.com while you're there. Quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support for all the 30 brands that we carry, as well as a full factory warranty to come along with it. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.